Welcome back, MTG Joe here. The Pro Tour Phyrexia is officially going on, and the first 3 rounds of draft are complete. They've now released all the Pioneer deck lists. We had a meta snapshot. It was a pretty even field, Rakdos being the most played, followed by Mono Green, a bunch of the other categories. But now that the deck lists are released, we're going to take a look, see what decks folks are bringing to the Pro Tour, as well as kind of any new tech, and then potentially some ideas of things that can be ported over to Arena for Explorer. So we won't go card for every list, but we're going to kind of focus on what the lists are and kind of highlight any new innovations, stuff like that. I'll link for all the deck lists if you want to copy for either Pioneer or for Arena, kind of porting it over. So the format is Paper Pioneer. So we're going to just jump into it. We have Rakdos Sacrifice as one of the lists. Nothing too innovative here. Copies of Meat Hook in the main. Kind of a cool card. I'm not sure if this is being played too much in the sack list, but Ashiok Dreamrender, really good against the Lotus Field combo. They have a lot of cards that allow them to search, so they can't search their abilities with the static effect. And this is a card that's fairly hard for them to get rid of once it hits the battlefield. In terms of the mana base, we are seeing Blackleaf Cliffs get included to a lot of these Rakdos mana bases, so just improving an already good mana base in that sense. We have our first copy of Mono Green Devotion, and kind of the tech that we've been seeing with some of them are the inclusion of Cityscape Leveler in the main in some lists. This version is actually opting for 2 Nissa Ascent Animist. So kind of top end, play it for 7 mana, gets ultimated right away, makes big bodies, deals with artifacts or enchantments, so really good in the mirror. This version's also playing the Nico Bolas, and you say, how is a mono green deck playing a blue, black, red card? It's thanks to Oath of Nissa, fixing the color mana, as well as Storm the Festival to cheat it in. And this is obviously a Nykthos Shrine to Nyx deck. We have the Filigree Silex as another additional new card in the Karn Wish board. So you get to put an oil counter on it, you get to sacrifice it, destroy each non-land permanent with mana value equal to the number of oil counters, so kind of your Ratchet Bomb effect. Or you can remove 10 oil counters and deal 10 damage. But more so for like the Ratchet Bomb, deal with tokens, kind of effect in that regard. Outside of that, nothing too significant. We see another version. This is like the Cityscape Leveler version. Fewer Planeswalkers in this particular, but we have like Mightstone, Meekstone. So some interesting kind of metagaming within it. We see Woodcaller Automaton as just a big threat out of the sideboard as well, out of this mono green deck, thanks to the Karn Wishboard package. Then see our first copy of Selesnya Angels. Really just like one Inspiring Overseer, that's kind of the flex spot, bringing in a Skyclave Cleric. That's usually one additional land slot since it can be hit. Full 8 Kayla's Reconstruction for Collected Company. Atomic versus any of like the land focused decks. And then Shapers, Johnny Strength of the Pride. So this is pretty stock list, nothing too dramatic about this. This deck could pretty much be ported over 1 for 1. I think the only addition is the addition of Razorverge Thicket, the new fast land cycle. So just another land to help improve the consistency of this deck, needing to, basically be like a white-based deck that splashes for the green cards. We then have our first copy of Mono White Aggro, Mono White Humans, and a couple cards we're seeing here. Skrelv, just like another Mother of Ruin style effect, also being able to give pseudo unblockable to one of your big threats. So in addition to Brave the Elements, just another kind of protection, unblockable style. Seeing some copies of Anointed Peacekeeper in the main, dealing with more of the mid-range decks, being able to tax, stuff like that. Sideboard, pretty stock as well. Your Wedding Announcements get brought in against the Rakdos deck, which helps in that matchup. See our first copy of Lotus Field combo. So this deck here is looking to abuse Lotus Field, copy with like Thespian Stage, and use effects like Pour Over the Pages to tap untap and generate a whole bunch of mana. And then from there you could like merge an ultimatum, basically cast your Omniscience if possible. If not, then you use Mastermind's Acquisition to find you your win con in the sideboard. Interesting to see Atraxa in the sideboard of this deck now. So we're seeing a couple new cards. I have not seen this card in forever. Sphinx of the Final Word. 7 mana, 5/5, can't be countered, flying hexproofs, and can't be countered. So brought in against the control matchup, it seems. Zakama is another big mana sink that you can use in the deck to just kind of pump through and just like blow up either hate pieces or just deal a whole bunch of damage to your opponent. Another mono green devotion. So this version's on Nisa. So you're seeing kind of like edge cases, some personal preference. The core of these decks are largely the same. It's just kind of edge cases of what you're adding, what you're not. This version's the Golgari-ish version, basically playing for Vraska in there. This one's got the Teferi to tap on tap. The Nykthos, and then generate a whole bunch of mana. You have Calling Ritual as a sweeper, Ritual Soot. So this version's playing some answers to some of the more aggressive decks in the format, so hedging. So it'd be interesting to see if the Golgari version ends up doing better than the strict mono green version. Then have another Lotus Field, so largely the same. Zakama as a wing con. We're seeing Atraxa on the sideboard. Lier is usually pretty common in these decks. First, is it Phoenix List? Just checking if there's anything new in the deck. So you're basically just binning your Arc-like Phoenixes, whole bunch of card advantage style effects. Pretty much stock. Yeah, nothing like out of the norm in there. This deck already had its fast line, so it doesn't get an improvement there. Another of the Cityscape Leveler version. This version's with Nicol Bolas. So you pretty much have like your core of the deck. The unfortunate thing is in Explorer right now, because we don't have Oath and Nisa, we can't quite do the take advantage of the Nicol Bolas effect. You could only hit it with the Storm the Festivals. So if you draw it, you're just always dead with it in your hand. So it doesn't really provide much utility that way. Chris Patello always brings the spice, and he brought the Mind Splice. So Mind Splice Apparatus, great Wizards website, doesn't actually show you the card. But this is the artifact that has flash for 4 mana, and then each upkeep you get an oil counter, and your spells cost 1 less for each oil counter on it. And basically, Chris is trying to take all the turns. So you have Temporal Trespass, Halloran's Epiphany, Galvanic Iteration to copy said turns, some bounce effects, stuff like that. Interesting to see Divide by 0 in this list. That allows you to get your Teachings of the Archaics, helps you draw a discard. You got a Sciences and a Mascot Exhibition as well. So kind of a throwback to the old Is It Turns deck in Standard. First, Dimir Control deck. So this is a deck that's shown a couple recent results in the leagues, but basically you get access to Sheoldred's Edict, which helps you deal with Planeswalkers for 2 mana. Torrential Gearhulk kind of is your wing con with a couple of Shark Typhoons and some creature lands mixed into there. You have the combination of Gyreach Sanitarium and Narset to force your opponent to discard a card every turn because they can't draw 2 on their upkeep. So kind of a cool interaction there. There's likely, let's see, no, sometimes they play the 3 mana blue draw 7 effect, but this version's not. Sideboard, you got some Kalitas. So Kalitas instead of Sheoldred. So kind of a more respecting the aggro, where Sheoldred is going to be more for the mid-range decks. She's very good against the aggro decks, but if it can be answered right away, you don't get the life. Kalitas, at least in combat, gains you some life. So just more mono green. We're going to see a lot of that. We see the Angels deck. This one's playing Skrelv, so just some protection effects for some of your key cards. A lot of it's similar, bringing in 4 Dampening Spheres for the mono green matchup or Lotus Field. Just really respecting that deck. This deck, from my understanding, has a pretty poor matchup against Lotus Field, so really respecting that matchup. We see the Mardu Sack, so Autumn Burchett. So this is kind of your core black-red sacrifice deck, splashing white for Rite of Oblivion as removal, as well as Showdown of the Skalds for card advantage. You also get Vanishing Verse as removal in the sideboard. So interesting to see if that tech works out. This is another deck that's pretty much on par to port over to Explore. So if you want to give that a shot, that's something you can do so in the format. Lotus Field again. We then have our first of the Gruul Vehicles list. So the Vehicles lists are experimenting with some of the cards. So we have Mirgalos, the 3-mana oil 4/4 that's being played in a lot of the lists, which we'll likely see. There's Werewolf Pack Leader here. So there's like the Jingantha, the non-Jingantha version. The Pack Leaders get played in the non-Jingantha, obviously. But you sometimes see Tajar, the 2-mana 3/3 legendary that protects legendary spells from if you sacrifice it, legendary creatures. But we're also seeing Luca in the sideboard here. Mono green, sack, pretty much stock sack list here. Is it Phoenix? Pretty much stock. Jace Wielder of Mystery, I guess alt win con if you mill yourself. Mono green Devotion, mono white humans, pretty much stock lists. So it's interesting to see folks that brought, this one's actually, so we have Bant Auras. So Light Pause gets you to find a bunch of key spells. You have Skrelv now for protection. So Skrelv is a card we've been now seeing in quite a few different Pioneer archetypes. So interesting to see how this little might fits in. Glade Cover Suckout is the card we're missing from the Explorer version, just having your hexproof 1-drop that can't be interacted with. And this is just like your Auras deck, they're calling it. You have Slip Out the Back for protection, so this is why this version's banned. But they usually play some off-color auras because you can tutor it up with Light Pause in the deck. Mana Confluence was something we got in Explorer, so you can use that to help fix your mana as well. We got Mono White, Rakdos Midrange, first version we're seeing here. And it's really just interesting to see some versions have gone to Sheoldred's Edict, some are still on the Dreadbore, some are on Bankbuster's Main, some aren't. So some variation in terms of your kind of flex spells in the deck. I always found it odd Power Word kills their choice of removal as opposed to something like Go for the Throat, just because it's dead against Angels in that matchup from at least playing the Rakdos side and the Angels side and Explorer. Like I usually felt pretty good being the Angels player. But interesting inclusion there. This was mentioning with the Gruul Vehicles list, you have Miglos, Maze Crusher, just another powerful 3-drop you can get ahead of curve. Gives you kind of pseudo unblockable as well. Some of the lists are actually now playing 2 of the Embercleave's main versions, actually on 4th run in the sideboard as well, which is an interesting inclusion there. I picked up a couple of these in paper. They're pretty cheap. They're like $1 for the full art, which seemed like a pretty good deal. Lotus Field, mono green. First of the control decks, Teferi, the Wandering Emperor. Interesting to see if they've included the new Emperors. They're on the Baneslayer Lyra package for aggro, Dream Trawler, Hullbreaker Horse. So a couple creatures for the for the more creature-based matchups, which is interesting. However, was wondering if like the Eternal Wander would find its way in these lists, but just 3/3 split of the existing walkers that we see in blue-white control. Again, just Gruul Vehicles, we're seeing like Embercleave in some numbers in these. Copperline Gorge is another card added to the deck, kind of mixed in there. We see our first of the Enigmatic Fires decks. Do they have... Okay, so this version is not playing Atraxa, so it might be last minute decision. This one's on Cavalier of Dawn, which is interesting, but from what I've seen from the Pioneer list, they are starting to include Atraxa since it could find so many cards in the deck, and it can be tutored within the deck itself fairly easy. Jim Davis is on Is It Creativity? So this is the combo version. So the core of this deck is Explorer legal. However, the win conditions in this version are not in Explorer right now. So there's the Sage of Hours and Locust God that gets you infinite tokens. This version here gives you World Spine Worm, and then you get Xenagos to give it to double its power and give it haste. And then so you could 30 shot them and kind of kill them on the spot. And then if it gets interacted with and dies, you get some bodies left behind. Rakdos midrange, so we see Sheoldred in this version, 1 Lily. Lily I know is kind of a flex spot in a lot of these too. We see 1 Dreadbore in this one. So continue just kind of going around like some of those numbers. Just checking if there's any kind of net new decks really quickly. Creativity, Rakdos midrange, Creativity for some folks, Lotus Field combo, Jund Citadel. This version is not playing the new Planeswalker, so you don't get instant speed access of your Priest. but kind of an old popular deck in the Citadel. Just more Rakdos mid-range. You see this version just being more creature heavy. Got some copies of Sky Sovereign in the main. So you're seeing a lot of variations of these particular decks. The core of the decks are the same, but interesting to see the different kind of builds that come through it. 4 Wandering Emperors, 3 Teferi, Elspeth's Sun's Champion, Regal Caracal is a sweet card in the sideboard of some of these decks against aggro. Brimaz as well, good against like mirror Wandering Emperor decks. Lotus Field, Grinning Ingus combo, so cool one where you basically make infinite mana with your Grinning Ingus, Runaway Steamkins, Burgies kind of thing, and then you draw through your whole deck. Your win condition is Defiler of Instincts or Devilish Valet, dealing enough damage to your opponent. Mardusak, which we saw, so I'm just going to kind of quickly skim. There's a lot of these deck lists, so we're not going to go, like I said, 1 through 1. You can take a look. But Mono Green is a Phoenix, Rakdos, Zorius. This version, Elspeth's Sun's Champion. Thought for sure it would kind of show up some numbers to the Eternal Wander. This is Omnath to Light. So bring to light, but with Omnath. Interesting, no Niv to Light, but just a lot of powerful spells in here. Fable Mirror Breaker, Leyline Binding. So kind of trying to mirror that like modern-esque deck in terms of powerful 4-color decks. Abzan Auras, another kind of similar deck. Skrelv again being played as a 4 of in this list. So just trying to kill your opponent. So I'm going to wrap this one up. Like I said, we can go through. There's a lot of cool decks here, but Hajar was the card I was mentioning. If you want to kind of take a look, see if anything jumps out. Lots of sweet tech here, but just wanted to get this out there since the deck list just dropped. You can take a look, and if there's anything you think would be cool that you spot on these lists that can be ported to Pioneer, drop a note in the comments, and we'll try to make some ports over there. In any case, thanks for watching. Hope you have a great one, and stay safe out there.